To me, depression is feeling like I can't get out of bed in the morning, things just aren't nearly as exciting anymore, and nothing seems fun. I'm not interested in anything, and I just want to stay by myself.
It's not typically someone who is sitting in the corner crying or sad. Very often, students who are depressed are really good at masking their depression. And so very often I'll see students who are the life of the party, but it's really a facade that they're putting on for their friends.
It's more than just being sad, but instead it involves changes in sleep patterns sometimes, changes in eating, feeling like you might be worthless or not good enough. Sometimes it's accompanied by suicidal thoughts. More often though, people often will find themselves experiencing times where perhaps they're not enjoying some of the things that they used to enjoy in the past. It's greater than being just sad or down. Everyone has those experiences sometimes, and so this is more significant and long-term than that.
But the best news is depression can be helped. Actually, with mental health professionals such as psychologists, psychiatrists, any type of therapy, and actually taking medication, or by doing both, there is success in getting help for depression.
Some of my personal favorite healthy mechanisms are spending some time outside, spending time with animals, or listening to some music.
For me, actually, it's exercise. When I'm having a bad day, I actually like to run. That's my mental relief. But to others, it's playing a video game, watching TV, their favorite comedy show.
Depression is also kind of hand in hand with anxiety. So very often what we'll see with students is a lot of anxiety, and then they use the drugs or alcohol to kind of quell those feelings. Or in contrast, if they're feeling depressed, they'll use them to try and elevate their mood. But what they don't realize is that those substances actually contribute to worsening their depression and their anxiety.
Sometimes people will use substances to cope with depression. Sometimes they sleep too much, eat too much, sleep or eat too little.
There's lots of different ways that people can cope with depression, and it really is that the individual needs to decide for themselves what works for them. So sometimes it can be things like regaining your own patterns of behavior, your sleep, eating, getting yourself out of bed on days when you don't feel like you want to do those kinds of things. For other people, coping with depression involves writing things down and exploring and talking about your own feelings. And for others, it can be medicine and therapy and a variety of things like that that can also be helpful.
What I see is very typically they will first go to a trusted adult or a trusted friend. And that's where I think Aevidum is such a powerful resource, because it teaches the students what they need to do if a friend comes to them and says, I'm feeling like I want to hurt myself. I'm feeling so depressed that I can't go on.
Not long after I started my freshman year of college, I was struggling a lot with depression and anxiety, and I found a group on my campus called Active Minds, which gave me a safe place to finally let out my emotions and all of my feelings in a place that I wasn't being judged. So that was definitely a big help for me. So first I would start with a club on your campus, maybe like an Aevidum club, something that can help you, or even just talking to peers or other people that you know that may have experienced a similar thing.
I wish that my son had thought that he could go to his parents, had said that day, Mom, I can't do this. But there are lots of ways if you feel like you can't talk to your parents. There are lots of trained counselors and teachers at school that are on special teams to help kids.
People can go to their family or friends, people that they actually trust and won't judge them. People can go to support groups, people can go to churches and talk to their local pastor. People can go to anyone that they feel that they can trust and talk to. People can actually, if they're thinking about suicide, contact the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline or the Crisis Text Line.
Certainly in schools, it's important to think about, are there teachers, are there guidance counselors, are there school psychologists that you feel comfortable talking to? That can always be an easier first step for students because they might have familiarity with these individuals. Outside of school, I think the important thing to do is talk to a parent or a trusted adult, let them know that you're concerned, let them know that you would like to get some help.
I personally have been seeing a therapist since my freshman year of college, which was in 2012, and I still see her every other week, and I swear by her. In the beginning, I used to tell people, oh, I just have an appointment at 3 o'clock or something, but now I say, hey, I'm going to see my therapist today, and I'm totally open about it because it's okay. It's okay to need help. It is okay.
I've learned myself that learning different ways to relax, like things like yoga and meditating, and trying to find different ways to learn relaxation techniques have been really successful in helping me cope with depression and stress.
One of the great ways to manage that stress is through athletics, through even just engagement in something, if you're not an athlete, engagement in something like drama, theater, any of the clubs and activities at school where you get that sense of connection to other people, that direct connection.
It really depends, again, on the person and what tends to work for them. And so some people exercise to help manage their stress. Eating healthy certainly helps with stress. Getting a good amount of sleep helps with stress. Mindfulness and sort of helping yourself be aware of what are you doing in the moment and just trying to be present as opposed to worrying about something that happened in the past or being concerned about what might be happening in the future. Those are simple ways to get started with helping to manage your own stress.
One of my personal favorite ways to manage stress is to cuddle up with my dog, Lily. She just gives me a little breath to realize how little animals think about the world and how little they stress, and just to be that simple-minded would be amazing. So I think that's a big part of why animals help when I'm stressing a lot.
Well, actually, the easiest thing to see and to hear is actually someone actually verbalizing and communicating their intent to want to take their own life, which can be verbally, it can be by notes, it can be actually typing on social media.
There are so many instances where, sadly, there's a tragedy, and people always ask the question, how could I have known that my loved one was going to take that step? And sometimes you can't. But one way to prevent a tragedy is to always have that open communication with someone. If you're noticing that someone seems different from who you typically know them to be, it's okay to say, are you okay? It's okay to even say out loud, have you thought about hurting yourself? Very often in my work, a student will have just spoken to another adult, and that adult, for whatever reason, didn't feel comfortable asking that question. But I asked the question, and even if they don't know me well, it's almost a relief to them to be able to say, yes, I've thought about that. And then we go from there.
Identifying a youth who might be at risk for suicide is very, very important. And it's a challenge, oftentimes even for kids who are friends with them. The key thing, though, is to recognize that when other youth are talking about suicide, if they are posting online about suicide, writing notes about it, looking up, searching on the internet about suicide, that's certainly a very important warning sign and indicator that they could be at risk. Beyond that, if there's a sense of feeling hopelessness, that things will never ever get better, and even when that person's trying to make things better, it just seems like they don't or they can't get better on their own, that's another warning sign for suicide. We also know that people often experience what they call overwhelming emotional pain. So it's this sense that it's not just depression anymore, but this sense that I've got this emotional, psychological pain that just won't go away or get any better. That's another sign or warning sign for suicide. And then there's some behavioral ones which are sometimes easier to notice if you're not having conversations about how somebody's really feeling. So some of those behavioral signs that are important would be changes in sleep patterns. So again, sleeping a lot more or sleeping a lot less than usual. Somebody who is a lot irritated or agitated in ways that they typically aren't before, or it's out of character for who they usually are, if they are getting angry more easily than they did before, or if they seem withdrawn and not involved in the activities and things that they had done in the past. It's really important, particularly for youth as well as adults, to sit down with somebody like that and say, listen, is everything okay? And begin that conversation.
Knowing that someone might be suicidal can be really tricky to figure out. I know in my personal experience, in retrospect, when my brother passed away, I did notice that he had been pulling away a little bit. He wasn't as involved with his friends. He was stuck in his room a lot of times playing video games and not interacting with people as much. So I think that's a big red flag, is just kind of pulling away from people that you care about, or not doing things that you used to be interested in, and not being yourself as you normally are.
Mental health issues come from different avenues. Some people have a genetic predisposition to anxiety or depression, meaning it runs in their family. And so a certain amount of stress in their life can then kind of trigger that anxiety or depression to come forward for them. Others don't have a genetic predisposition. However, they are exposed to maybe a traumatic loss. They're exposed to a lot of stress in their life that then affects their brain chemistry.
Mental illness can affect anybody. There's certainly some cases where individuals might be more prone to mental illness. So for example, somebody who has a parent or grandparent who has bipolar disorder or schizophrenia may be more likely to have that than somebody else. But that doesn't mean that they're going to develop those conditions, nor does it mean that somebody who doesn't have those family relationships won't.
Nobody believes that I have clinical depression. That's not a thing to anyone. Nobody, nope.
Because right, you seem one way, so they assume
I
like, oh, you can't
seem
have
fine.
Yeah, you do.
Still see a therapist every other week.
Yeah. No, so I think
okay.
Exactly. One of my favorite quotes is that not everybody struggles with mental health, but everybody has mental health. Just because you're not having a bad day doesn't mean tomorrow might not be bad, or next week. And just because today's bad doesn't mean next week will be. I think it's important to realize that everyone struggles in their own way and everyone copes in their own way and can be helped in their own way.
All of us are affected though, because all of us know someone that's struggling at any time with a mental health disorder. So we all need to learn more about it and to learn to help people with it.
Mental illness doesn't necessarily mean that somebody's weak or incapable of doing things. It's not a character flaw of them. Many people can be affected, and the truth is that many people have different signs or symptoms of mental illnesses such as anxiety or depression. It's when they become extreme, it's difficult to manage life sometimes, that's when it affects people more. But again, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're weak, there's something wrong with you. These are all things that can be treatable and all things that we can certainly help to make better.
There is a huge stigma attached to seeking mental health treatment. And one of the other powerful messages through Aevidum is that it's okay to get the help that you need.
When you're sitting there thinking about how miserable you are and how sad you are, just think that you're not the only one in that room thinking that probably. I guarantee there's somebody else thinking about how their day isn't going well, and you're not the only one. So reach out, speak up, and get the help that you need because you are worth it.